Hey everybody, welcome to the Mountain Deer Podcast. Today we're talking snow.
Yeah.
Snow. Let's talk snow.
Very important.
There's nothing like snow for
What we do. Yeah.
at least for several reasons. There's nothing like snow. I don't care what kind of snow it is. If there's some kind of snow,
Yeah.
they can't fly. So
No.
that's big. And to be able to follow them, and they can't get away. Well, they might be able to get away, but they can't hide because you'll be able to follow them pretty near everywhere they go. And that part of it is nice if you have the space. And even if you don't, at least you can take them as far as you can take them. And you learn a lot about them. Their history is written in it, and it's just like a book on the land.
Yep.
And that nice new white sheet is awesome.
That's basically like the main advantage of tracking over almost any other form of deer hunting, is because you don't need to really be after this one deer with cameras and lots of experience with him in order to get his history and find out his habits and identify him.
Yeah, where he lives.
Because you
where
only
he hides,
basically as soon as you hop on a track, you know how he walks, you know his step, you can get an estimate of how big he is, all these other things, and it's all written down for you. But you have to know how to read it.
You need to know the language.
Yeah, it's subtle, and it's a form of it's like deer literacy. It's like their print.
It's an investigation, right? And it's
Yes.
all written on the ground, and to be able to see it and understand it and take it in and read the language of what's going on in front of you that in itself is practically an art form, and it's a skill like at the same time.
Yes.
Because there's some things that you there's like little signs that you pick up, and then as you go, which we're going to talk about, and as you go, you start finding the proof of that, right? So snow itself
Is the entire basis of tracking.
well, it is pretty much. I mean, you have blood trails. You have other tracking.
As far as
too,
like
but-
standard deer tracking,
Right.
How you think and basically how you're going to do it is you kind of need snow. You can use dirt and you can find prints and all this other stuff to kind of get you in the general area of a deer. But after that, it's just still hunting. Like even when we go out and it's November and we don't have snow yet, you're mostly still hunting. You're just moving through the woods, taking your time, paying attention, hoping you're flip-flopping, hoping you run into something.
Right.
But once you get snow,
things
game
change,
on.
right?
Game
Things
on,
change
baby.
like crazy, and your odds like climb. I want to
Tremendously.
It's at least 2 or 3 times better than it would be still hunting
Easily.
Not to mention, like, there's all kinds of like satellite circumstances that will happen because there's snow on the ground.
Yes.
You'll find and learn other things. You'll learn more about the woods.
You learn about truck traffic. You learn about other hunters. You learn about coyotes, moose, everything.
Yeah, and you're also seeing a history of it as the snow gets older and older.
Yep.
Right? And to know that history and pick it up on the ground for that spot is it's such an enthralling thing. Like, a lot of deer hunting is really take it easy, wait,
Chill.
yeah, and this way here you're learning all the
proactive.
time, and it is really, that part of it's really super duper.
I
love it.
It is a more active than passive style of hunting. It's almost like fishing. If your ice fishing is a bit more passive, because you're confined to that one space or a few holes, and you can't cast and you can't investigate the water and all these other things quite as well as you can when you're on a boat and you can read the land and use your fish finder, and you're flying around and you can gather more data and speed up the process better. Basically, tracking is like, instead of putting all the responsibility in the deer's hands to come to you, you're saying, I'm going to take control of the situation, go get him.
Yeah.
It's like, we're going to do this.
Not to mention, like, it's like a speed scouting in a way for
Yep.
real time,
And the entire-
or
right
at
then.
least super recent history. Now, one of the deals is, of course, that when you're talking snow all the time, and that's why I want to try and keep that our main subject here, is like, there's a lot of different snows.
Yes.
You can
Not
say,
all
"Oh,
snows are created equal.
Yeah,
no
absolutely.
snow is, the only, like, if you have snow is good, period. But there are different kinds, and you have to use them differently.
Right.
Yeah.
There's going to be, the real soft, fluffy kind. There's going to be the dusting. There's the thick, soft, wet stuff. There's also
Crunch.
Yeah, there's some
Crunch.
crust,
And
freaking crust.
You're
right?
Captain Crunch, so you're the
Yeah.
number one
Right? You have
resource on that.
You have lots and lots of different kinds of crust, depths of crust.
Yep. Layers of crust as
yeah,
well.
yeah, you
If
have-
it's snowing, if it's old snow, new snow.
Yeah, the age of it, of course, and elevation has a huge effect on the kind of snow.
How much?
How much snow it is, whether or not it's wind blown or not. The wind has a big effect on the
Yep.
snow. How much sun it's been exposed to, how much rain it's been exposed to.
Yep.
If there's lots of snow on the trees versus lots of snow that has been blown off the trees.
Yep.
That's a huge part of it.
If it is snowing currently,
Yeah, if
that
it's
changes
coming down
things,
at
right?
the time. Yeah.
Let's do this. Let's talk about
There's a lot
the
of stuff.
best. Let's do best case scenario, and let's work backwards of, what kind of snow that we find is the best for tracking, that is the least difficult to read, and then we'll work our way all the way to like crusty, crunchy, terrible stuff, and how to take advantage of all the different kinds of snow that we normally run into.
Right.
So, what is your favorite depth and texture and temperature for when you're tracking? Like what's optimal for you?
Well, I always heard, and like with Larry's book and some of the different guys who've talked about tracking over the years, and even the other hunters I knew were really good at it. They're like 2 or 3 inches, 4 inches of soft, wet, sticky snow. Kind of wet-ish snow,
Quiet
so that
walking.
you could step on it and it wouldn't crust. And because it's kind of that perfect temperature of right at 30, or a little above or a little bit below, right in that
Yeah.
30, 32 degree ballpark, that they always talked about that being the best. And I just believed them and said, yeah, that's the best, but not so much anymore.
Really?
Now that I've spent more time doing it and I've seen more different crust and snow and
Conditions.
wind and all the conditions possible, the real killer day has been the gusty, breezy, cold,
Really cold.
good and cold, so that the snow is sifty and it's soft but frozen.
Like sand more.
It's like sandish, and the wind covers me so much I can't hear myself walk. When it's sticky and it crushes under your foot and you hear as
Yeah,
you
it
walk,
creaks.
It creaks like a little bit.
Yep.
Now,
The
if you're
snowman
going-
snow.
Yeah, if you're going slow, or if you slide your toe down into it, you can minimize how much racket you make. And because it's kind of wet-ish snow, the sticks that it's landed on have had time to soak up some of that moisture underneath the snow,
And they don't crack.
and they don't snap anywhere near as bad because they're a little wet. Right, the ground was kind of wet. It was wet snow as it started
Yeah,
coming
it
down.
was warmer when it had started.
Yeah. The other thing is whether or not the ground is frozen, and
Oh,
what
yes.
difference that makes. Because
Snow on non-frozen ground is really good.
yeah,
It's quiet.
Or when it's froze rock hard, and then you put a whole bunch of nice fluff on
Yep,
it
powder.
with a pretty good breeze, so that the trees are making a little noise. Then the wind is blowing pretty good, and it covers all that. It makes a lot of movement in the woods.
Mm-hmm.
So picking out a deer can sometimes be a little tougher because the trees are blowing in
But
the
still,
breeze and stuff.
There's movement, there's sound, cover, and the wind messes up your scent.
Yeah,
When it's
see-
a really strong wind, it blows your scent around and disperses quickly,
I want conditions that take away at least one of the deer's senses.
if not all of them.
If not all of them, if you can, right? At least get it down to see, that's the thing with that real cold, snowy, blowy day. Number one, the scent is all over the place, but it's blowing strong enough. So even if they got a little tiny whiff, it doesn't last long. The direction is hard for them to figure out because they just smelt a little puff in this giant breeze, and they don't know where it comes from. So they're a little less likely to just bolt and go crazy because they want to know, especially if they're not super spooked by it. The other thing too is that when it's really windy and it's really cold, and all my hiking and moving through the woods, I can hardly hear myself. It makes me feel more confident that I'm sneaking around really well. I'm undercover,
Which helps you. It helps you mentally focus because you're not worried about what's happening with
right.
you going through the woods. You can just focus on what you're going after.
There's an added advantage of having the wind break up your sound
Yes.
it does take away from their sound. Like when they run, you don't hear a thing. All you see is a brown blur, punk, and they're gone. Now the white on the ground everywhere helps the brown stand out so that you can notice the deer better. That's another really good thing is visibility is better.
It's
in stick season, especially.
It's
with snow
basically
on the ground.
those are like the two main advantages of snow is it's less for them to blend into, and now it's just into trees and bushes instead of the ground as well.
Right.
And you get to follow them. So if they stand out better and they can't really hide, they can only run. That's a huge advantage for you.
That helps like crazy.
Oh, yeah, it does.
You know, and with your wind taking away some of the noise, which is their ears, and it takes away some of the nose and the smell. That's good.
Yeah.
I like those two things. The other thing is the wind creates a lot of movement in the woods, and the movement helps cover my movement. It helps cover theirs as well, right? When everything in the woods is moving, it's harder to pick something out because everything, like if a deer is just walking and feeding and they're going along real slow and the trees are and the branches are all blowing like in the wind, he blends in like crazy
Yeah, it doesn't
because he's
stand
going,
out.
but so do I.
Yep.
So that's good. But it does take away just a whisker on that visibility thing. But you make up for it with the white contrast.
And with you being almost invisible.
Yes,
You
that
need
makes
that.
that helps
We need
like
that.
crazy, you know. So if you can take away some of the deer senses, it helps like crazy.
Yep.
The worst kind of conditions would be really old snow with no deer tracks in it, right? You know, if there's been you're in a
Yeah.
spot where there's old snow, it's 4 days old, and there's no deer tracks.
That's bad.
And it's crusty to boot. It's like time to leave, time to get out of that zone wherever
Yep.
you are. It's time to find a deer track and get out of there.
The
get away from that
crunchy,
spot.
crusty old snow with no wind we struggled with that pretty hard. I think almost everybody did in the 2019 season.
Oh, and even 2018 had some times
all
too.
the way,
Yes.
like especially most of December was that way, and the end. Like we got tons of snow early, and it came super great up to the middle, and then it started to peter out. We got a lot of bluebird days with no wind. We had no wind last year.
It stayed a little cool, but it warmed up just enough during the day that it
To melt
would
the top layer a little.
Yeah, melt the top, and then you ended up with a little bit of crust that was like solidified more and more with every bluebird day that landed on
Yeah.
it. Plus, with the crust and the excellent hearing and excellent visibility the
terrible.
deer had, we couldn't get anywhere near them. But
Yeah, it was rough.
Some of them were 200-300 yards, and they were already onto us and running, and like you couldn't do anything.
Especially towards the end of the season when they had been shoving each other around a little bit, and on crust and things like that. Coyotes work really good on crust because they're light.
Yep.
And they had been pushed around by hunters a bit, so now they're wired and they hear you coming and you can't sneak or hide from them. It was like, good luck.
Yeah, we just
A lot of
circled them
people
around.
were very frustrated.
We educated the crap out of them
Yeah,
with
literally.
2 years worth of snow too.
Mm-hmm.
See, we had snow almost the entire deer season for 17,
It
for
was-
18, 19.
Yeah,
we had tons.
we
and
didn't
tons of
get
snow.
we didn't get snow till the 10th in 2017, but from then all the way we've had snow every day.
Right. So to have like almost an entire deer season of snow on the
Basically every
ground,
day.
and every deer in the woods saw lots of people,
Mm-hmm.
and every hunter could find deer eventually. You know, even if he just went into a section of woods and went stand hunting, he would see where all the tracks were, see what was going on, and then set up and be there. And of course, the deer would just come through those areas because they were actually using them, and would discover all these people in there. And it would just, there was so much
Make 'em
deer,
wired.
deer human contact
Mm-hmm.
going on during the season, and it was so easy to find out what was happening where with all of that snow.
And with snow so far south,
Yep, that too.
you know what I mean? Like
Yes.
even southern Vermont, Massachusetts, southern New Hampshire in the last few years have turned up some deer that you didn't know were there. Some big, beautiful bucks, like nice racks and stuff had come out of Vermont.
Sure.
As well.
Yep.
And, with so many people getting into the woods and having such good snow conditions, deer are getting educated hard.
Yeah,
and that's
yeah.
one of the things about, having snow is now you have the ability to utilize more styles of hunting to take advantage of whatever your area and conditions are.
Yep. The other thing is like snow depth.
Yeah.
And how much you get.
For me, I like 1.5 inches minimum because it shows the depth of the track and it gives you, because where we hunt, there's a lot of thickness to the woods.
Yep.
And if you don't get a decent amount of snow to really fall, a lot of it gets hung up on the trees. And especially the next day on the snow, there's not much on the ground inside the woods.
Especially in softwoods,
Yeah.
right? It all collects on the
Yeah,
branches.
and then it doesn't
hardly
come down
any
through.
landed on the ground.
So you kind of need at least a decent amount of snow. But especially when you get that snow at like from midnight to like 4, if you get it in that last half of the night,
Yep.
there's no sense in rushing out into the woods that early, because it's like where we are with a pretty low deer population. You know what I mean? Like
They haven't had time
you haven't
to
had
move
time
it.
to move and make tracks. But if you do find a track, it's right there. Like
Yeah,
you're on
it'll
it.
be smoking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so like that's one of the things when it comes to new snow and where we are, when you have areas that are similar in deer population and hunter density and all this other stuff, you can see that it takes a minute to find a good track. And a lot of times the next day, a day old snow, I find I like the best.
Yeah, that second night of
Yes.
snow, they move around in it
Yep.
quite a bit.
It gives you
Especially if
a
it came
better
late the first night.
because an entire 24 hours of snow gives you a lot more to pick from and a lot more data on the ground for you to sift through than it does brand new snow. Like everyone's real excited about brand new snow. I get excited about brand new snow, but I always find that you have to work pretty hard where we go to get a good sized track that's brand new.
Right.
You're almost better off to just like, do all your road work and do all your research, get everything ready and go for a walk. And if you come across a track, great. But if you don't, like don't be surprised if you don't find anything especially in the first like 5-6 hours of brand new snow.
Well, part of that also depends on the rut and
Yes,
like,
how far they're moving,
like
if it's
the
going.
season, like and whether it's pre-rut or whatever. The first week in November, and there's very, very few does that are even in heat. And
yeah.
they're just a single here and
The
there.
ruts have been
spread out.
late.
Yeah, in the last few
years, they've been really late.
Well, the calendar shifts, of course, and there's been a calendar shift. I mean, the moon is the same every year, and whatever amount
But
of
when the
daylight
season-
is
yeah.
the same. It's just when our calendar falls on the daylight.
When we start getting into the woods.
Right, and of
basically.
course, where we arrange our seasons to line up with things.
Yeah.
Now, the first week in November, when we first get to camp, we're a little out of tune, and like
Takes a minute.
like the last couple of years, we've gotten snow within the first 3 days of the season. Sometimes even on the first day there
Yep.
was snow,
Both years in a row.
or it was snowing
Yep.
on the first day. So we hop in the rig. We're a little off because we haven't been hunting for a year, So we jump out of the rig and we start, just looking around and seeing what's up, and we start sniffing things for, what's going on.
Got to take a peek around.
Right. And when we get out there, and you guys, especially when you were younger, you guys were all excited because, look, Dad, there's snow. And you guys were like, we're going to go and this is going to be happening. And I'm like, no, dude, just relax,
Chill.
right? Because they haven't even made any tracks yet. It's not going to be today. It'll be tomorrow, right? It doesn't take too long and you start figuring out when you're likely to find the kind of track you're looking for,
Yeah.
and whatnot. Now, the first week in November, them bucks might be kind of still homebodies, still on that summertime-ish kind of routine where they get up at night and wander around, lay down a little bit of sign. They might make a scrape or rub their horns a little bit and maybe go for a little walk and have something to eat, but they're not wandering all that far. They haven't got into that, like, go look phase.
Yeah,
that
we call
search.
it that just putting miles on that zombie walking. Just gotta find it. That starting to get compelled to move. That I gotta find a doe.
See, they're not into that yet.
No.
So they're kind of just hanging out in their spot. Now, if they're not moving that much and you get that snow during the first week of November, you're going to want to look around for a good size food source with a thick, nasty spot somewhere close by, a big swamp, a steep hillside, something near it.
Yep.
And then start looking for tracks going back and forth from that good food up to some security of some kind, right?
Yep.
So you run that road on the side of the mountain where the cut's down at the bottom and the cliff
Yep.
is all rocks and they can't cut it, and hardly anybody ever walks up in there, and that's where more likely he is to go up and lay down. And you just start scouting in between the two, trying to find where he like crosses a road or something. Now, when the snow flies and you found a spot like that, and here comes the snow, and you drive out there and you have a look at this kind of like, it's a bottleneck where he's going, a pass to get through from one area to the other, and you just go and check that for a track, and you see what's up and see if he's still using it or whatnot, and if it's real time. Now, sometimes, when we started talking about snow depth, a lot of times in the beginning, especially for us, we might have an inch, inch and a half on the first storm. Sometimes it's 6 inches.
Yeah.
I've only had like a couple of years, like where there was a 14-inch storm in the first week in November. And most of it landed way up high, 3,000 feet. Most of it was way up on the tops because the temperature just isn't cold enough yet. When it's 34 down low, up on top, it might be 29 or 28 degrees. So the tops of the mountains will be all white. But as soon as you go downhill, there's nothing, right?
Yeah.
So most of the deer were either in the middle or the bottom where all the feed was, and we'd go running up into that snow on top where it's just greenery and stuff, and go up there and run around, and the moose are up there, but there was no deer, right?
Yeah.
Or if there was a deer, he just went over the top and went down out of the snow again, right? Mm-hmm. So that a lot of times snow can be elevation, specific. So if you have like some mountains around, that's going to be where the snow hits first.
Yeah.
So we want to do our scouting around those.
Which is one of the reasons why when we do have snow early in the season, why everybody runs up to the top of the mountains is because there's snow there and you can at least see if anything's kicking up high.
And there might be a depth that's enough for you to follow a deer.
That's right.
And you might just get lucky. There might just be one up there.
Which has happened 1,000
times.
Oh,
sure. And he just circles around someplace and lays down, and you get up in there with him and just nice and easy, and it's just the right amount, and bang, and you shoot the bugger. A lot of early season deer are shot in snow up high.
Yeah, and it's a way for, one, it's a good excuse for you to travel up. You get your legs on, you figure out but if I'm going to walk around and see nothing, I'd want to be walking around on snow and seeing nothing. It just, it feels better, right? Rather walk than on crusty leaves and not see anything. I'd rather walk on crusty snow.
Right.
Same thing. But being able to eliminate sections of woods based on what you see on the ground is pretty awesome. Yep. And it's easy, when you have snow, it's easy to pattern the kinds of woods that deer are spending their time in that time of year. Mm-hmm. And it helps you, narrow down a section of the haystack to search for that needle.
Right.
Even if you don't have a track, if you're not seeing anything, that is still good because it's still information that you can use. They are not here right now. Why are they not here?
Right.
And you can start to develop an idea about what the deer are doing and what they're like in your area that time of year, and then you're good to go.
Sure. Now, when you start getting into, say, week 2, right, and you have some snow.
Old snow now.
Yeah, and now, like we said, we had one season where there was like 10, 12 inches of snow. There was 15 way up high. Mm-hmm. And then
in the first 2 weeks.
Yeah, and there was only like 2 inches down low in that first week.
18.
And of course,
it was up to our waist in 2018.
Yes.
In the bottoms. Like we had a lot of snow in the first 2 weeks.
Oh yeah, it came like crazy. Now, years ago when we had this like poof of a storm that was a freak, and it landed up high, and there was a little bit down low, and of course there were tons of people low, they were hunting, and the deer all got shoved uphill in a short while. And then they were all on the top, and then everybody ran up into the top to hunt those deer, and the weather warmed right up again, right? It was just a little freak thing where you got a whole bunch of snow, and then the system blew off. In New England, we have like 3-day weather patterns. You get a new weather pattern every 3 days.
Yeah.
You have something coming in, it stays for a while, and then it blows out.
Yep.
And a new something blows in again.
It's pretty short because we have the jet stream coming across the northern plains and then it hits the Great Lakes, and then we get tons of lake effect snow. Like the Adirondacks gets a bunch of snow, it comes through and gets dumped on that top band.
Sure.
That runs basically like the height of Vermont all the way across, and it just goes whoosh, in 3 days it's out to the ocean.
Well, see, our standard jet stream comes down like before the Great Lakes, dips down into like Pennsylvania,
Yep.
and then turns and comes up along the coast, towards Maine and towards Vermont.
Yep.
A lot of times it's almost over the coast. And of course, as soon as you have that like vacuum of the wind coming down into the U.S., then turning and going back up the side of it, north of that will be colder air, and of course south of that will be the warmer Gulf air, right?
Yep.
And the jet stream kind of divides those two air systems.
And it dips down the colder weather towards us.
Right, and it pulls that cold down, but it also pulls moisture up from the Gulf Stream, right? And so you can have like this storm that's down in Tennessee or whatever, and the jet stream will grab it and pull it up along the coast, and being near the coast, it'll gather moisture, but we're on the cold side of the moisture, so it'll come through, and it'll be mostly rain, along the coast of Maine and Massachusetts through there. It'll be rain and cold. Yeah, even in Vermont sometimes it'll be mixed a little bit. And then up high, where the air is forced to come uphill and it's spinning and it's full of water and the temperature's just right, it'll be beautiful for bringing in moisture, cold, and just about 32 degrees to the tops of the mountains. But then the jet stream shifts just a little bit, and say it comes more towards Vermont and it lets some of the warmer air into New England. Then all of a sudden it'll warm back up again, and that nice, beautiful 14 inches of snow is soft and sticky and wet and just right.
And awesome for tracking.
It's awesome.
Quiet.
That's right. Now, provided it continues to warm, you're fine.
Yep.
But as soon as it cools off, now you go to a crust on top. So anytime that there's a melt off, especially early in the rut, the first 2 weeks, I want to get it done right then, or I know I'm going to have to wait till either it warms up enough so all the snow melts and we get new snow and start again, or
it dumps a lot more snow.
It dumps a lot more snow, and I can hunt down low in the new snow and avoid that crusty stuff that's up on the top.
Yep.
Right? So a lot of times I'll use elevation to get the kind of snow conditions I want, provided there's a deer there. Right?
Yes.
If there's a deer in the bottom, well, you hunt the bottom.
Yeah.
If there's a deer in the middle,
Great
you hunt the
snow
middle.
with no deer around, still worthless snow.
That's right.
Technically.
That's right.
Yeah.
So, just because the conditions are perfect in a spot doesn't mean that I want to go there and spend all my time there if there's not a deer there.
Yep.
Right. But by the same token, the depth is real important, and elevation has everything to do with the depth, and you can almost always plan on more snow being higher and less snow being down low. And as soon as the snow conditions say you really get a dumping, you're going to want to start hunting more downhill. So we try and scout areas down low, down in the bottom someplace, close to town or whatever, where the snow elevations are the least. And then as you get more and more snow, you'll have to move more and more downhill, or even in your state, move more and more south, so that you get away from the mountains a little bit more when the snow really comes.
Yep.
If I have to have a lot of snow, I like it cold and sifty.
Yep.
If it's going to be up to the top of my boots or something.
That classic late muzzleloader season kind of
Fluff.
You know what I mean? That fluffy, quiet, windy, nasty days.
Yep.
The cloudy, snowy, the not so nice days are the best. It's just like bass fishing. Mm-hmm. The bluebird, quiet, nothing wants to do anything those days, and you're out there and you're like, ugh, But when you get that weather, you're just like, yes, here we go. Now
and it's not that you can't shoot a deer on any day.
No, because we've done it on any kind of day.
That's
no
right.
snow, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But your odds and the amount of information you can get and the advantage is more shifted towards you, and you're taking less of the win away from them, basically.
I always like to try and plan my vacation so that it was flexible. I'd say, well, I want I get 2 weeks off in November, right? So I want the second and the third week, so that it would be, the beginning and the middle of the rut.
And your odds of having snow, because it's later into the year, were better.
Now, say the snow didn't show up on the second week, but it did on the third, and I could even take the fourth if I needed to. Having your vacation be able to be shuffled when you're close to finding out what the weather pattern you're going to deal with, so that you go at the prime time, is always important.
Yep.
And I would always shy away from going late, because the deer season's going and they're already shooting all these deer, and there's only going to be 3 left, right? I had that idea.
Yeah.
And those are educated ones. Right at the end of the season, those are the harder ones, right? Because they've been educated, and they're used to being hunted, and they're already in the garbage, and they're scared to death over shaking in the bushes, right? So I would always shy away from going late, but actually late is the best time. It really is, and it lines up more with the rut and the rutting activity. It can line up with migration activity in a lot of places, like in Maine.
Yep.
And that snow depth, makes a big difference on the migration situation. And especially deer that live in the mountains, when it really starts coming down and getting big and heavy, it doesn't take long, and the does especially head out. The bucks don't necessarily want to get right into heading out phase, because they want to take care of themselves, and they know them big cliffs are the place to hang out. and to not get caught by anybody, so they'll stay up there. But as soon as the does head out, the bucks are going to come right along after them. Just like I'm sure out west, when the cows start pouring out of the mountains, all the bulls will follow them. It's just the way it goes. So it only makes sense. Not that there isn't stragglers, and there's exceptions to everything, but
Always.
But the snow depth, we've tracked quite a few deer on a 1/4 inch of snow. And
Just
shot them.
basically just enough to cover on the leaves. Like even
So
you
you
can
could
still
see it.
leaves, but you can see the outline of an imprint. That's enough. That's all you need.
Yeah.
But the problem is you have to spend a lot more time looking down.
Yes.
The less snow that you have, the less of the depth, the more you have to pay attention to the track and keep your eyes open, especially when you start getting into it's older snow that's not very deep and there's lots of traffic.
Yep.
It's harder to discern the larger deer from the smaller deer and to see what's happening, check out all the business that's going down
Well,
there.
you can't see it so far out in front of you.
And you have to keep bouncing your chin down and up in order to see what's happening, which is dangerous.
Well, see, you want to pay attention and not stop looking for deer. One of the things about tracking is like you almost need one of those a neck collar so that you will not
You used
look
to say
at the
that
ground.
about us all the time.
Right. I'm like, you pretend you got a neck collar on, and when you look down, it's only when you're really sure there isn't a deer standing there. First scan everywhere up high. Say you're walking along and you lose the track and you're going to need to go back to looking at the ground. Now the deer is going real easy, and there's a fair chance that he could be right there someplace. And you're going to have to look down and walk and figure things out on the ground. Before you go doing that, make sure that there isn't anything standing right there.
Yeah.
Look everything over good, and don't get caught with your chin against your chest, looking down, right?
Yep.
You don't want to do that. So I spend all my time looking, is it safe? And then, I don't see anything. Okay, now I'll look down, and I'll do as much with my eyes without moving my body as I can. I'll try and figure it out as best I can. When there's no depth to the snow, you can't see what stump it goes around 20 or 30 yards in front of you. So the magic depth is like 3 or 4 inches, where you can see way out in front of you. You can watch the track in the snow, but you can also see far enough so that you're not looking down much. And even while you're looking at the track, you're almost looking at the deer if it was laying down or standing right there someplace. Yeah. Your eyes are already level with being able to see the deer.
One of the disadvantages of a lot of snow is you can't see the terrain that you're walking on quite as well. Mm-hmm. And you can't see all the sticks and all the rocks and all the things and the water, and you can't see these things quite as well
Underneath the snow.
And right? It makes it hazardous and loud. And a lot of times you're in lots of snow and you're feeling good, and then it looks like it's completely clean underneath, and you take a step and crack, you step on a big stick, and you're like, oh my God. Right?
Yeah, or you almost fall down because
Yeah.
you step on the side of a rock, mm-hmm. right? And your foot kicks off to one side.
So
it's
definitely the more than 2, less than 6 zone.
Yes.
Yep. Anything in between that is perfect, and that works really good.
Myself, I don't care to have a lot of snow on the trees.
No.
In general.
Because you have to plow through it, and it gets on your clothes, and you get wet.
It also blocks your view. You can't
see
through
them.
things.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, it can be to your advantage as well.
Yep.
I mean, if the deer's out in the open and you're in a whole bunch of snow, and then you just nice and carefully look out into that opening, odds of the deer seeing you are hardly any.
Yep.
And if you luck out and he's someplace where he's out in the open a little bit and you can look from cover and see him there, now you got it. That's a distinct advantage. That's good. But I don't like a lot of snow down my neck. I don't like a lot of snow tumbling into my scope or on top of my gun. I want to keep that dry and clean all the time.
Yeah.
Same as if it was raining and snow. A million times we've had snow change over to rain, mm-hmm. where it warmed a little bit. And now your scope is wet and blurry,
Yep.
and you can't see through it anywhere near as well. Or if you have scope caps, right?
Yep.
Now you have to remember to flip them up. So that's an issue too, right? So you want to know your gun well and that kind of stuff. The rainy on top of snow is a real common thing.
When you get that snow all over the trees, like you're talking about, so you get a good dusting of snow, right? And say you get 3-4 inches all over the place.
Yep.
And it starts to heat up, and now all of the snow that's on your trees and on the branches and on the spruces starts to drip and melt.
Yes.
That is advantage and disadvantage at the exact same time.
Yeah.
One, you're wet, right? Which makes you uncomfortable, which makes and then it's easy to get cold at towards the end of the day.
Right.
And now you're soaked and you don't want to be out there and all these other things. And like mentally, that kind of wants to pull you out. But it's noise, it's cover, and it's movement, which as the tracker and as stalking goes, that's good, right?
Yes.
Because it's more cover noise. So when you get those days where there's snow all over the trees and it's going to warm up, you want to make sure you bring a couple extra changes of clothes in the car or the truck or whatever. But those days are great, and you can shoot deer on those days really well because the snow is soft, because it's warm.
Yep.
It's nice and quiet. When they step and they leave a print, a lot of times it's a perfect print.
Yes,
Everything,
you can
it's
see the
nice and
shape of
molded.
it.
You could see the shape. It's not, because when you have fluffy snow has a tendency to cave in on itself when it starts to get deep. Right. And because when that sandy, nice powder snow that you like it will slide into the track itself. And sometimes it's a little bit harder to see direction when it's real deep. It's hard to see the real shape and the real, so you don't get as much clear info. But when it's that sticky, super warm snow, you get to see everything.
Yeah, that 4 inches of beautiful
Yep.
stuff, and it's fairly quiet. The sticks are wet underneath it, and they flex a
there's
little
the
bit.
movement and the dripping off the trees. That's why you and I were allowed to get so close to the two-step bucks so many times, was because we were tracking in that kind of weather.
Yeah, that was really good stuff.
It was 2 days in a row of that, and it worked out really well. But the problem is when it's really warm like that and sticky, and there's no snow on the trees, the contrast, he doesn't stand out as good.
Yeah,
Especially when you're coming uphill and stuff.
Yep.
When the deer's higher than you, his body is farther up away from the ground, so he doesn't
Yeah.
stand out from the snow layer that you're walking on anymore.
Right.
And it's like you have to be
He's at the
careful
top
that way.
part of your viewing.
That's right.
Yeah, and that
It's
makes it a little tougher.
Yep. So that made that difficult. But the drippy nastiness, other than how you were feeling, like that kind of like weird, like your shoulders are pinched up and you're kind of just trying to keep it all, and you're soaked. And that is the only downside from that. I feel like the cleaning your scope and stuff always, but.
Yep.
But that's great weather tracking.
There was a tiny bit of the creep in your boot as you crush the snow. Yeah, it would crush the
that
snow.
weird sound.
Now, the second, because I'm cameraman, right, you would step, and then I would step in your track.
Yes. So now it's
So
only
there's
one crunching track.
Yeah, and that helped like crazy.
We even do that on crusty snow. Like when any of us are doing a 2-man on a track, step in your hunting partner's track.
Right. Sit down, dog. Tail banging on the table. The big thing that you got to remember too is that a lot of times with elevation and that wet, rainy, drippy kind of situation that you have, and the snow's a little bit wet, at elevation a lot of times there's a fog, or the cloud cover in those kind of circumstances is usually pretty low, and you can have like a foggy situation either down in a swamp where there's like this mist in the air. And I absolutely detest hunting in the fog. For some reason, deer seem to see a lot better. Their vision, I don't know what it is about fog, but deer just seem to get me, and I miss them standing there. Maybe it's just me being bad at what I'm doing. I don't know. But I've had so many deer in the fog that were just standing there, and they stood there and stood there and stood there and let me come along and didn't move. And I'm looking right through them. They're right in front of me, and I'm like, that bugger's got to be right here.
Especially
and
really
I'm actually looking right
deer
at
that
him.
are more gray than they are brown hide in fog really well.
And when they're wet, they hide even better. You know, that like little bit darker of a grayish blends right in. If you mix that with the whites, it blends right in. Our deer are really, super camouflaged for their woods that they're in. And I hate fog because I never seem to get it.
Even though you actually shot a 200-pounder in the fog.
Right.
And what'd you name that deer?
Fog.
Yeah. I hate hunting in it. Pow.
But that was just like a freak rare circumstance.
Yeah.
And he didn't even know I was there. And we just like walked right up to each other in the bull yard. And that coming together like that, I just heard chunk, 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 and I stopped, and there was a moose out probably 70 yards to my right. And it got up and it walked off. All I could see was a rear end. It looked like a cow. I wasn't sure. So I just happened to see that, and I'm standing there watching it walk away in the fog. And there's a big blowdown about 10 feet to my right. A big half a spruce tree just busted off, and it's laying there. And out from that spruce tree, as I'm looking over the top of it to see the cow, out from that, I only had to shift my eyes down about 2 feet at 10 feet. And here comes some antlers walking right out of that blowdown, and it comes around the corner, and it's here to the bathroom door from me. I don't know, 12, 14 feet. 18 feet away. A 200-pounder just walks right up to me and comes around this blowdown and then stops and stands there staring at me. And here I am. It's raining pretty good. I've got my Butler Creek scope caps down, and I've got my gun just part way up. When I saw the antlers, I started to lift my gun, but he came right out so quick that I couldn't move anymore. And I've just got the gun kind of at and almost shouldered. The stock is in my armpit. I haven't gotten it on the front of my shoulder. It's just in my armpit. And I've got the gun pointed towards him, and he's just standing there, and the two of us are staring at each other at about 15, 20 feet. And I said to myself, well, just shoot. Just tip the gun down and put the barrel, point the gun at him and shoot him, right? So I bring it down a little bit, and I pull the trigger, and it goes about an inch over his back. Now, this is 7mm Magnum, at about 20 feet, and that thing goes pow, right over his back. And he just goes, he just barely twitched, and that's it. And he just stood there like a statue. And I just touched that gun off right in his face and missed him point blank. And all he did was literally just barely twitch.
Like flinch a little bit.
Yeah, and then just stood there. And now I'm going, oh, right? my face just, oh. And here I am standing there with an empty bolt action, and there is absolutely nothing I can do about it. There's no way. He's not even halfway around the blowdown. And he's just looking at me, and there's nothing. I can't run that ball. If he just pulls his head down and turns around, he's out of sight. All he literally has to do is drop his head to run and turn a little bit, and he's completely gone, and there's nothing I can do about it because of the dip in the hillside.
And there's no way you're going to be fast enough when he's looking dead at you.
And the two of us are just standing there, and I'm watching him, and I can see about 3 inches of smoke coming off the top of my barrel, from the powder smoke coming out of the top of my barrel.
Yeah.
And I'm just looking at him with that smoking barrel, and the two of us are just frozen in time.
Oh, man.
Time stopped. And he just stood there, we eyes locked at 20 yards, and me with an empty gun. Oh. And I had time enough to go, oh. And then, boom, boom, and he takes off, right?
Yeah.
And, of course, I run the bolt, and I run around the tree. But
Yeah.
You can only see about 30 yards in the fog.
Max. Yeah.
And it's a beautiful spot. If it wasn't for the fog, I could have just run around that tree and opened up on him. But he was gone. And he just drifted away like fog. And I'm bumming. I'm just totally bumming.
But there was snow.
There was a little bit of snow, but it was just patches. And it's all melting and rotting like crazy. Right?
That stresses me out a little bit.
Yeah.
When you're on a track and it's all starting to go and you're like, we gotta go, but I can't go fast. And
Now that was the only snow in town. The rest of it all melted. Everything was on the peak of the mountain.
Yeah,
I was 3,500 feet.
Yeah, I was gonna say you were all the way up.
Right. So here we are at 3,000 plus feet, and he just does one of them dip run, and he's gone, and he's out in the fog, and there's nothing I can do. And I called like crazy, but it didn't matter.
Yep.
So I hunted in his direction and never saw him. And another day went by, and then I went back up.
And that's when the video picked up.
That's when I filmed the doe, and then I filmed that giant bull sleeping.
And then killed him.
Then I shot that same buck right in his bed about 250 yards from where I saw him and shot at him 2 days before that.
Yeah.
And then I filmed the white moose. So,
and won an Oscar and
Oh,
found $1 million. And what else did you do that day?
I should have bought a lottery ticket. It's the one thing I didn't do.
Yeah, that was a mistake.
But it just goes to show that I hate that fog, and a fog is always an issue.
It can be a big disadvantage.
So you end up, especially if you think you're close in the fog, go slow. The other one was Zigzag. He was eating on a green moss on a log. He was eating the green, real lively green moss. He was eating that on a log, and he pulled up to that log, and he nibbled like crazy. And then he was in the fog too, but you could see about 50 yards. Now he's right on the edge of the fog, and I'm looking at where he nibbled. And now I'm looking with my eyes, following the track as far as I can in his direction. And as I'm standing there, the wind does a little circle, and he blows at me. And I'm like, oh, he's right here. And I've got my gun, and I'm looking at and of course, with me, I can only hear out of one ear. So like triangulating and figuring out where a sound came from, I have to hear it 2-3 times to know the direction.
Yeah.
And of course, I heard it once and I didn't know the direction. And I heard it a second time, and then he took off running.
Yeah. So you had a visual cue.
Yeah, now I had a visual cue, and I knew where he was. I get the gun up, and he just kind of, the top part of his head jumps through my scope, and I just see these giant forklift antlers, and he just, boom, and then he's gone. And then he blows all the way down in the fog, and he's got to be 150 yards. And he's still blowing at me, and then he's gone. And I chase him for quite a ways. I get 2 more looks at his antlers, and I don't see body, and there's nothing to shoot at, and he's gone. And then I go back the following year, and I shoot him when he's a little older, and that worked out anyway. But again, that fog situation, when you get close to them in the fog, slow up and be careful. It's so easy to miss them at the edge of your perception. You know, where the farthest you can see, you want to be looking out there. It doesn't mean that they're not up close too.
One of the things that's hard is when you are on snow and the snow conditions don't change, like the age of the track doesn't look any different when you get like really fluffy snow.
Mm-hmm. When it's real cold, especially. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's
from day to day, it's harder to figure out what's new and what's not.
And when you're on the track, it's hard to tell when you're getting close sometimes. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times I have to keep in mind that the track, because of the kind of weather that we have and how the snow is, he might be right here, but the track might look a little older.
Yep.
You know?
Yep.
And you have to, one of the great things I like about kind of melty snow is older tracks, the centers start to go. Mm-hmm. And when you find a track on like good snowball snow, the center in between their two toes, you'll see the center of it still. Sure. There'll be that line that separates the individuals, and then you know this is a relatively freshish track, right? And now it's time to whoa up, and you get a cue from that melty snow. That does help you quite a bit.
Yeah, your 200-pounder there, you know, that looked really fresh.
Yes.
Now, the other thing that sometimes we'll do is, like, we get back to our hunting area the next day, you know, where we were the day before. Say you found a good one, and you start regularly checking, looking for him, seeing where he is, what's going on. First thing in the morning, I will, even at camp, I'll walk outdoors and I'll look at yesterday's tracks and see how much they look or how different they are from a brand new track right now.
That's a great little bit right there.
Yeah, because I'll walk outdoors in the morning and I'll see if they're blown in, right? If the wind blew during the night, it was cold, fluffy snow, but the wind picked up during the night. Yep. Now there's a little bit of drifting. Yeah, you can see the drifting in it. You know, noticing the difference between yesterday's tracks and today's tracks.
Just yours.
Yes, I want to see it. The other thing is, like, say there's a big runway crossing a road and lots of deer are using it or moose are using it. Say you're moose hunting and, you know, same exact scenario. You have a big runway that, or even if it's down in the woods and you were there yesterday and say you went hunting in that area and you had to cross that runway on the way back to the rig at night. So you look at it, you look at your runway where you crossed it, and you know you'll be back in the morning. You know, say there's a signpost rub, and you keep walking down to that signpost rub to see if a new buck has come through and rubbed on it, and you're going to use that as a place to pick up a track.
Yep.
Or to check your camera or whatever. When I'm leaving at the end of the day and there's a big runway and I want to know if anybody's used it during the night, I'll walk all over it. I'll sweep it with my foot, like a 10-foot section of it. I'll sweep it open so that there's nothing but my boot tracks in there.
And when they go back through, they'll be fresh and they'll be the only things on that sweep section.
And I'll know how much activity happened that night. And
Yep.
I won't be looking at a real thick mix of old tracks and new tracks.
Yep.
And that can be a big, how many times have we
oh my
done
God.
that where
we've picked up good tracks doing that before.
Oh, sure.
Because it's hard to discern, especially if it's really old snow, like 5 days, you
Yep.
need to do that.
Yep.
And if there's really nothing coming in the forecast, you got to do that.
Now, see, that's what we did on Mr. Rogers. We went out on Sunday and did some filming in the woods. There's no hunting in Maine on Sunday. So we went out and did a little scouting, and we did some filming.
Yep,
And we
went
filmed
for a
some
drive.
partridges, and we filmed ourselves, and we did some drone flying and stuff too, and just went out and filmed. There's not much to do, so we did that.
Yeah.
But while we were scouting, there was this one runway that crosses a little small dead-end road, and there were tons of deer using that runway. So when we drove out at it, I said, oh, look at that runway right there. So I walked out it and I took a look at it. And when I came back, I dragged my feet all over it and then hopped in the rig. And then Monday morning when we went back, it's covered with his track.
Yeah.
And we
you can
know.
see what kind of activity happened.
That's right. Now, we swept it at 2 p.m?
Yeah, probably.
So
It was it was a couple hours before dark, so it
Right.
must have been like 2:30.
So there's, at least 12 hours worth of traffic from dark till the morning, but there was also the afternoon traffic that could have come through too.
Yep.
The other thing too is like we'll make a little track somewhere and check and see, like, is anybody driven out the road or not. We're tracking people as much as we track deer.
Yep.
We're tracking the amount of truck traffic and where everybody's going and looking and whatnot. And by paying attention even to truck tracks and which way they turn and whether or not, a lot of times we'll say, yeah, there's 2 rigs out this road somewhere.
Every day.
Yeah, and you do it every single day.
Mm-hmm.
And if the conditions are just right, you can tell, well, there's a couple people hunting on this road. Let's go try that road over there.
The other thing we love to do is when somebody shoots a deer, go into that and go up the drag mark.
Oh, yeah. A lot of times there's
how many
a buck
times
track
have
on
people
top of
messaged
that.
us they
Yes.
shot deer on our drags?
Oh, yeah.
That when Jimmy shot the decoy, that was 2015,
Boy.
I think.
Or even
it was either
earlier than
15 or 13.
that. Yep.
And no, it was 13 because I shot mushbuck that
Okay.
same year.
Yep. Yep.
And we
There was
had-
a doe in heat with 2 bucks.
With 2 bucks. And we
chasing
had
her.
dragged Jimmy's deer out, after,
Yep.
after we had gotten it. And a couple guys that live in that area had walked up our drag mark. And they're like, oh, let's go. Right, that's where we're headed. So
Let's
we'll
go
walk
see
up these
where you
guys.
shot it.
And a deer was coming down our deer's drag mark, right? Because they just smell. They don't know that was a dead deer or whatever.
Right.
But they smell the blood and they smell
the
the
buck.
tarsal and they smell like it's just a lot of business, right? And during the rut, that deer is curious. So he walks over and he goes right down the track and those guys have walked up and pow, and it was an 8-pointer.
Right. So
Right.
another 8-pointer comes running down.
Yeah.
Jimmy's was a 6 or an 8?
I think it was a 6. It was either a 5 or a 6. It might have been, I think it was a 5.
5, okay. And we drag it out, and this buck comes down. Now, remember, there was a doe in heat and 2 bucks chasing it, but there was a 3rd buck in the woods.
Yep.
Now, the big one, when Jimmy shot, took off and left, right?
Jimmy sees his buck, shoots it, and as soon as that deer goes down, he's like, "Yeah, I got it." He looks, and there's a big buck standing there, and then the thing runs in this big rack, and he's like, "I shot the small one."
Right,
And
right.
That's why we named that the decoy buck. That's on YouTube. That's a funny video.
Right. Now, the big one runs north, and Beaver takes off after that one. And meanwhile, we help Jimmy out, and we get his deer down to the rig. And as we're getting his deer down to the rig, and we no more than get it there, and Beaver's still chasing the big one, and it's turned around and it's coming back in our direction a little bit, and he's trying to get that deer. And we go down, and we happen to be close to the reporting station. We report the deer, and then we drive back up. And as we get up in there comes 2 guys, and they're dragging another deer out right on top of our drag mark.
Yep.
So we start talking to them, and they're like, yeah, well, we just started walking up, and this buck comes right down your drag mark. That is real common.
Yes, it's very common.
It happens
That's
a fair
great.
amount.
That's great.
If you're an old guy
Teamwork.
and somebody just dragged out a deer someplace,
Go sit
and
over the
you
gut
want to
pile.
walk somewhere, walk up that track.
And go sit over the gut pile too.
That won't hurt
coyotes and
anything.
all kinds of animals and scent and things. Like, it's all of a sudden the woods are going to come alive right there.
There's something happening,
Because
right?
things,
Yeah.
it's just like whenever you do a lot of cutting in the woods and you lay down some trees, the chaos and all the mess and things happening, all the
Attract.
birds and everything flies over there and to check it out.
Sure.
Deer did the same thing.
Oh yeah, you fire up a fell buncher and you start cutting trees, and the moose are going to be there that evening.
Yep.
They're coming right down to it. What's going on, right?
Mm-hmm.
If somebody comes into your living room and starts wrecking it and then turns around and leaves for a while, what are you going to do? You're going to run down there and check it out.
Yeah.
Right? So that's kind of what all the animals do too, and that's can sometimes be a helpful thing.
Yeah.
But
And when you do that and you have snow, you know what's happening.
that was like a perfect killer day because that was 5 inches of fluff and really
Super
cold,
cold and windy.
bitter and windy. Yep.
Yep.
And of course the wind and he was in a bunch of small beaches and the
That
leaves.
rattly paper sound.
Yeah, it just makes you
smack
cold.
you in the face. Just thinking those, it just makes you get. Whew.
Yeah, chilly.
Yeah, I know. It's like 70 in the shop, and we're both like, whoa.
The other thing is when it's cold and really windy, the deer will be active. Especially you
stay
mix,
warm.
Yeah, you mix rut activity plus really cold and windy, and the deer will be on their feet.
Yep.
They'll spend less time laying down and more time on their feet. And when they're on their feet and you're on your feet, you're going to run into them. You're just going to bump into some anyway, and especially if you're on top of any amount of deer sign. If you're on a runway, you pick the thickest, nicest runway in the snow in one patch of woods, and you walk on that, you're going to meet every hunter, you're going to meet every deer, every moose, every coyote, everything is going to be in that area. So at least, even if you're not actually tracking, but you're just looking for a place to still hunt on top of the most deer sign you can find.
Yep. I remember there's been a lot of times where we go from, we'll have these isolated patches of thick spruces and nice cover surrounded by an ocean of your standard hardwood, big nothing undercover.
Yep.
Right. And if you're going basically from checkpoint to checkpoint through these little, good green patches, and you walk through the big hardwoods and there's nothing on the hardwoods, the next day, everything will have walked up your tracks, especially when the snow is deep. Everything is looking like you're going through the woods in deep snow, and there's a snowmobile trail. Where are you going to get out and walk?
Yeah, on the snowmobile
It's
trail.
easier to walk on tracks and in less snow than to go out there and plow through it
your own
yourself.
trail, right.
So deer, moose, everything are going to walk up your tracks from yesterday. Going back and checking your trail where you came out of the woods sometimes is also a really good idea.
Yep.
Because you might funnel them right down to your parking spot.
Another thing about getting a decent amount of snow, especially once you're a little bit tuned up, is that if you can't find any tracks, say it's real fresh and nothing has had a chance to move too much, but you do know some deer like pockets that are pretty good, we'll just do a cross section right through a pocket.
Yep.
We'll drop one of the fellas off and they'll just go straight across it and just see if there's anything in there.
See what tracks are around.
Yeah, and if there's any sign of any deer being down in there, just do a cross section. We'll cut from road to road or across a big swamp or up over a mountain and down the other side, right? Now, when the snow depth is really a lot, it taxes you.
Tires are out.
And
pushing.
especially if you have to climb. If you climb and it's steep and there's a lot of snow, you don't. Each step is so short that you get tired in a short while. So like if the snow is really deep and you're going to be hunting in deep snow, you want to make sure that you're concentrated in the best possible area and you're not wandering around in lots of deep snow for a long time without any chance of seeing deer. No, you want sign, you want runways, you want something so that you know that you're
If there's nothing on the ground, it's time to find another patch of woods.
right, and you don't want to waste a lot of time in empty woods.
Yep. Tire yourself out for nothing.
When the walking is good, it's not a big deal to blow through a giant hardwood patch and get over to the other side and get back into the slash and the boulders and the rocks and the garbage, where a deer might actually be for that day. It's not a big deal to blow across big sections. We'll do it all the time. We'll just go from, 2 or 3 hamlets, line them all up and just go cross country.
Yep.
And we're not looking for a deer standing there. We're just going. So you just plow and you just go. Now the snow conditions that are good for that, of course, are those cold, fluffy ones. Because you're hiking, and when it's cold, I like that because I don't get hot.
Yep.
I don't steam up. And if you don't sweat a lot, then when you do have to slow down, you're not damp and get cold quickly, So regulating your body temperature in them colder conditions is a lot easier, I think, because you can just move.
You just
to
unzip
stay
your
warm.
coat a little bit more and
Yeah,
let some air in it, and you can
Yep.
you can like thermostat your body.
Take
better.
a break if you're getting hot.
Yep.
You know, if you're climbing,
Don't
and
get
you're
sweated.
getting hot.
Don't get
sweat.
sweated on cold days like that.
That's right.
The other thing that can tire you out is crusty snow. Crusty snow tires you out bad.
It's like
especially
two
when,
impacts.
You know,
Yeah.
it's like you step, it breaks through, and then you have to like lift your other foot up and you step and break through. And if you do that all day long, your legs are shot. But you know, and everybody hates crusty snow. And out of all the snows, crusty snow is my least favorite. Most of the time because of what made it, right? When it goes from storm to sunny and warm, and then it's starting to cool back down, and there might be a storm coming again, or it gets cold at night.
Yep.
It creates this snow, and most of the time it's paired with one more bluebird day after that.
Yep.
So you get this day of where it's super loud, dead quiet when it's like a high pressure system.
Yep.
And you know, you're making tons of noise. There's no cover really, and the woods are dead silent. And a lot of times it does come later into the season when all yours right, and now everything's wound up, and it like creates this perfect storm of it being difficult to get a deer. But there are some advantages of crusty snow.
Absolutely.
If you're not moving, you hear them moving.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Yep.
Still hunting on crusty snow works really good. Sometimes tracking is difficult, but we've shot deer on crusty snow all the time.
Sure.
It's easier for you to play the buck game because your grunts go a lot farther, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you can just walk, and then you stop and listen for a really long time.
And you can pair it with walking.
Yep. You
Yeah,
can
so the two come
actually
together.
use your and try to like, because deer have a crunch, right? And you can kind of do the same thing, but people do this big. So what we'll do on crusty days is we'll take shorter steps
Punk, punk, punk.
and do this like
stop
crunch,
and
crunch,
listen.
crunch, 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 like short, quick, close steps, and then stop and you just stand there and listen for a really long time. And then go back to it, right? And just, you know, try to sound just like a deer. And because if you're going to make noise, you know what I mean? On those days, you're going to make noise. There's nothing you're going to do to quiet
They're
it down.
gonna hear you.
They're going to hear you. So you might as well at least try to convince them that you're a deer. Use that sound and that crust and the quiet conditions to your advantage. And we did a video on that last year when we had It was like 2.5 weeks of that weather. That's
Oh, it was terrible.
It was like, it was so discouraging. We were all ready to hang up our rifles and muzzle loader. You're like, I'm not even sure if I wanted to go, right? Because it was like that. But of course, Cocoa Puff, our motivational hunter, kept us going. But
Make sure when you're doing that, you're wearing orange.
Oh,
You do
yes.
that to a hunter, and he's going to think you're a deer. He's
Oh,
gonna be wound
yeah.
right up, and you want to be safe, that way.
yeah, you definitely do. And it's just like turkey hunting. It moves, you're acting and
careful.
sounding just like the game. So you have to be careful. But that is a great way. And we have shot many deer on crust doing that.
And a whole bunch of our subscribers and stuff have come back and said, hey, I did
works really
what
well.
you said, and man, did that work.
Yep.
Even some snort wheezes have brought deer right back to people, and they're like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Does that
the
work?
calling to a deer that hasn't ever experienced calling not being a deer, why would he have any other reason to think otherwise?
Right.
So that works really well. Calling works pretty good, but to smaller deer, a lot of times, especially later middle rut, calling to smaller deer doesn't necessarily work that good. I find it's best to find the biggest, most badass track you can, and then you call him up, and you want to basically go to the yard and take on the biggest guy who thinks he's the boss.
Every now and then, though, you meet a small bully.
Yeah, you do.
Oh, I had this little 5-pointer,
Yep.
and wow, did he gave me a show. And
Yeah.
that was back before I had a cameraman. But
That was that was Ontario, wasn't it?
No, New Hampshire.
Oh, yeah,
right on
yeah.
the New
Yeah,
Hampshire
yep,
border.
yep. I remember.
Right by Garfield Falls there.
Yeah,
And
that was a while ago.
Oh yeah, and that little bugger just he was like giving me the bulwark. He put his head down and he scratched the ground with his front leg, and every hair standing up
Attitude.
on him. And
We like deer with attitude.
Yeah, it's like, let's go, But there was a huge one there, and I didn't want to shoot him because the other one might come running in. He was snort wheezing me and everything else,
Yep.
and I mean he's dangerous. That little bugger is dangerous.
Rattling.
If he attacked me, I'd probably be dead meat. And I don't think shooting him would stop him either. That
When
you
they get
have
that
to make
look,
a really
when they
good
get that
shot.
look in their eye,
Oh my God! So you want to be careful. It's like calling in a great big bull. They can do it. Even a cow can do a job.
rattling
on
on those days would probably work pretty well.
Yeah,
Yep, 'cause
rattling
it
would work
carries good.
Yeah, it would
Yep.
work darn good.
Your tipper cans.
Especially if you were patient.
Yep.
You know, that's one of the things on crust, though, is you got to be real, because they're not just
Yeah.
going to come plowing right up to you. They may circle you some.
Check your
which is-
downwind
yeah,
all the time.
They'll try and hook you and get a smell of you, and that's a lot more common. Or they'll just stand there forever and ever and ever. Some of them are wicked patient.
The bigger ones are real patient.
And especially with crust, that
Yep.
makes them doubly patient. They're
Yep.
not in a big hurry to go smashing crust and come running up to you.
Yep.
But that doesn't mean they won't.
that doesn't mean that's right.
And there's been a few times where they have.
But you have to give it a go, and try some of these things. Go out there and find a pattern, and find how your snow normally is, and see what's going to work really good for you.
Yeah. Now, one of the things when you're looking at weather forecasts, and we're talking snow again, right, is like temperatures are everything. And the weather forecast when it comes to temperature is way more reliable than snow depth, duration of the wind. It's way more reliable than some of their like long range forecasts. The temperatures are usually really close.
Yeah.
So when they say, well, it's going to be 32 for a high, and
better on
15
temperature than
at night,
they are on accumulation.
They'll be really close.
Yep.
Now, those temperatures are key to how long your snow lasts, or how it goes about breaking down.
What kind of snow you get?
Right. So like I'm watching those temperature forecasts way ahead, and the high for the day and the low for the day, and then the high for like a high elevation and the low for a high elevation are way different. So elevation is very specific when it comes to temperature.
Yes.
So if you know you're going to be hunting up the mountains, the temperature is going to be 10, 15 degrees different,
Yep.
Than what they're predicting down low. And then wind is another thing. And I always want to know, what are the temperatures for the week? And when
Yeah,
they
trend.
say those things, what's the trend, the highs and the lows? Then I know how the snow is going to either stay or not. And there'll be some places where the snow won't be affected because of elevation, because of the temperature.
Yes.
So I know it's a little crusty down low, but up high it stayed cold enough that it didn't melt.
It'll be quieter
And now
walking.
there's quiet walking up high, and I know that without even going up. I know it's better conditions higher.
Exactly.
So if we got a buck in the bottom and we shove him uphill, I got a better chance on top of the mountain. I'll try and get him in the crust down below, but if he runs uphill, that's great, right? Because I know it, and I haven't even been up high yet, and I know it's already better if he climbs.
Yep.
And if he's on the top and the conditions are terrible, and I shove him down in the bottom where the conditions are better, right? So those things help.
Yep, for sure. One
The
of
other
the
thing I like to do is make sure that you're definitely checking more than one outlet.
that is exactly what I was gonna say.
Because if there's any like variance in what the two of them say,
Yeah.
so we'll like say, well, what do they say the temperature is going to be? And then what's this guy say the temperature is going to be? And of course, you might even have to be specific to your location. They tell us, we can type in Rangeley or Stratton area or whatever.
Yep. Jackman, whatever.
And we can be 6 miles away in a camp, and it's 6 degrees cooler on average than what they say. So I pay attention to what they say it's going to be, and then what it actually is.
And that can give you
And that'll give us a better idea.
pattern.
Yeah. And then,
Yep.
of course, over time, as you learn to hunt, like say it's a new spot, and you learn to hunt it, and you see how actual it is and how actual it isn't.
how close they are when they
Especially if you
predict.
have cell service and you're up on
Yep.
top of the mountain with your cell phone and you've got service, you can see what the temperature is.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So, that is really a good thing. And
That's
it
pretty
helps.
rare for us to
Yeah.
have cell service.
Yeah. It's not as bad as it used to be, but,
Yeah.
there was a day when you couldn't make any calls, but now at least you can a lot.
One of the other things I like to do is I don't just check where I am going to hunt tomorrow for weather-wise. You look at the map as a whole, and you look at the entire area that you could drive to. And you say, well, what kind of conditions is everybody else having? Because, if I have a spot that I like to hunt, but the weather's going to suck, you may as well go someplace else, even if it's someplace new that's having prime weather.
Yeah.
Because the conditions matter a lot for tracking. It's a
You
major,
can easily
major
drive
advantage.
10 miles and have
A
huntable
complete-
snow, and no one else knew about it.
Oh yeah, my first Maine buck. Do you remember that day?
Yeah, drop tine deer.
That's right. We drive up. We were
25 miles from camp. All of that.
It was
25.
a 20-minute drive.
Yeah.
And we were up there, we didn't have much for weather. We did have snow, and back at camp there was no snow. And the area that we like to hunt in didn't have snow either. And this is a bit farther north and a whisker higher in elevation.
Yep.
And the windmill buck jumps out, and we pow pow pow, and everything's great. Yeah, and we start dragging him down to the Jeep, and the skies open up, and all of a sudden we get a load of snow, and it's sharp, icy snow, and the wind is horrendous and just blowing and crazy. We drive the road down.
20 minutes.
We get back down onto blacktop, 20 minutes down towards the reporting station. It is bluebird sunny, and it's like 60 something degrees. We were in t-shirts, and that's all in the video. And Jimmy's like, we found a new weather belt, right?
Yep.
And it was amazing, the difference in a little bit of distance. So just if the area that you like to hunt in like your spot isn't having that good weather, go try someplace else, because it might be worth the drive. Because like us, we weren't having any luck there, and we're like, we need to get out of here. We need a new weather pattern. We need a new area. So we just got out, went a little bit more northeast, and then bang, we found snow, found a buck track, and got it done.
Like in our area here, most of the wind either comes from the northwest, the west, or the southwest. And it's headed in the easterly direction.
Unless it's a nasty storm like a nor'easter or something, we don't ever get in the opposite direction.
You're
almost
absolutely always right. It goes west to east.
Always.
So with the weather moving that way across a north-south mountain range, where's all the snow actually going to land?
The eastern side.
On the eastern side.
Where the clouds get driven up from the mountains, and then it dumps on the east side.
There's one side of the mountain that holds its snow the longest.
The side that the sun doesn't pound.
That's right.
Because that's exactly what happened
either
to
in
us
greenery
in Colorado.
Or in northern.
That's why Keith got that
cold.
elk. Because we were on the western side of the Rockies, and they had no snow, and it was hot, and it sucked. And we went more eastern in the range, and all of a sudden we found snow, found elk, pow, got it done.
And we were in the mountain's shadow.
That's right.
Right? Being in the mountain's shadow will help the snow stay longer.
Yeah. So sometimes being on the northeast and east side of things, it
can be an advantage.
Because it does get morning sun, but it's not hot sun. The hotter sun is from noon on.
Yep. The other thing is the eastern and the northern sides of the mountain will have less brush.
Because it'll be taller too.
Trees. That's right.
Because the sunlight.
Yes, the amount of sunlight that hits a spot has a huge effect on what grows there and how it grows.
That's right.
So the woods can be a lot of times more tall and less brushy. A little easier to see.
Yep.
There's less feed in general for most of the animals.
Yep.
So keep those things in mind. They matter.
They do. And they can at least help you find some snow, so that way you actually can start tracking.
The whole point of like this whole podcast is to help you start coming up with patterns. When you're bass fishing, you say, well, what's the pattern for today? Where are the fish hanging out? What color they like?
Yep.
How active are they? What are they eating? What's going on, right? Yep. And when you catch one and you start figuring out why he was where he was.
Yep. What's the speed? Everything.
Right. Why are these moose all piled up on this part of the mountain, right? So you start asking these questions, and now you start creating patterns in your head, and pretty quick you're able to do that right straight through. So as you start developing these patterns and you start noticing why things are the way they are and why and how the animals are using the landscape, and you develop these patterns, now like in the first couple 3 days, you start figuring out exactly how things work, and you'll be able to just like go to a brand new mountain range and look it over and say, well, this is the pattern over there. Let's see if it works here.
Yep.
And just start putting X's on the mountain before you even walk up there. You're just looking at it from the road, and you say, well, there's a little bench right there, and there's this and there's that, and I'm going to go for that. And then as you make your loop up over the mountain and out around, and you come back, you'll start figuring that stuff out, and now you'll apply those patterns to what you're doing all the time.
That's right. And you'll be able to take advantage of the situation regardless of what the weather and the conditions are doing, because you can get a deer in any conditions, right? It can happen.
Yep.
As long as you know the best kind of action, the best course of action and methods that you should take up for what is happening in your area.
You have, weather limitations, season limitations, time limitations. Say it's the end of the day, right?
Yep.
You have walking limitations, how far you can go in a day, or how much time you have to hunt, right? So when you're using all these patterns to help maximize what you can personally do,
Yep.
You're improving your odds the best you can.
That's right.
Now, what will be a great pattern for one person won't be a great pattern for the next guy. So, like, by taking advantage of even what the other guys can do, I know there'll be a ton of guys coming in from this piece of woods over here, and if I get in this little bottleneck next to the beaver dam and I can sit for a while, here come those deer, and they'll go right by me, and I'll be able to get one. And a lot of times, you're maximizing what you can do with the patterns that you have and make it work for you.
Yeah.
You know, you don't have to be, if you can walk a quarter mile,
you can
track
buck.
a deer and shoot it.
Yeah.
You know, it's the difference is knowing what you're looking at and being able to read it and then make it work for you.
The one thing that we will do is if there's a great big buck and we want this one really bad, or there's an area we really know is hot, we will wait until the conditions are our favorite, until they get just right, then we'll go in there. Because I would rather go in to get that big buck that I want on a nice, windy, nasty, quiet walking day than to go in on a crunchy, super bluebird quiet day, right?
And blow it and educate him. And
that's right.
else,
And I want to be able to, the first time we meet, I want to be the last time. I don't want to jump a buck 1,000 times. I don't want to educate him day after day. I want to get in there and get him before he knows what's going on, right? The element of surprise is one of the best things that come with tracking. It's the first time you meet, you pull right up on them. There's no waiting. And if the conditions are great, it just adds to your ability to make that happen.
It doesn't mean, however, that you can't blow it and go right back the next day and do it beautiful.
No.
You might blow it four
No,
times
that's
in a row.
absolutely
You
right.
might blow it 12 times in a row.
You might blow it 5 years in a row, and then 4 days in a row, and on the fifth day of the 6th year,
there
right?
he is. He's finally dead, right?
That's right.
Right? So sometimes it's supposed to work that way, but
That's
you know,
right.
you do what you can with what you got, and it's all cool.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with any of it.
Go hunt in all conditions, and don't let any one particular condition discourage you from going out there and attempting anyway.
That's right.
Because it's super important to go and do it. Because some days, like Tyrod, there's no snow, it's 60 degrees, you get out of the truck, you walk 200 yards, and there he is. Right?
And that's where he was.
That's
anyway.
where he was, right?
That's where he
and
liked
you
to be.
would not have gotten him if you were like, well, there's no snow, I don't really want to go out and track, we'll just meh. Right? You don't get them on the couch. So no matter what the weather is like, go out there and make an attempt and look for the patterns and then trial and error.
Right.
That's how you do it.
The other thing that's beauty about the snow is it teaches you his tricks. It teaches you his routines. Every buck is different. Every person who hunts him is different.
It's all laid out there for you.
Yeah, and if you pick up on it and you learn some of the things, and sometimes it's easy to get super assuming, oh, this is exactly what he does, and he does this every time.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he may all of a sudden like have 4 other tricks that he's got ready to go, and when you actually put that to the test, you find out he can do other things.
He's got some surprises
It's so
for you.
easy to like start drawing too many conclusions.
Yes, it
and
is.
that you can go overboard there.
Yep.
And don't get too crazy about it, but stay positive and just let it rip and
Yep.
learn all and be open about everything.
Yep.
Because things change. They always
Yep.
do. Being flexible in your thoughts and being flexible in what you do is really good. And take the time to predict what you think is going to happen. But do it with an open mind-ish. I got a feeling this is what, use your feelings and say, I got a feeling this is what he's going to do. And
Yep.
I start tracking him for a ways. He's going to go here, here, and here. And then when he actually does it, or he pulls a stunt that I should have thought of, right? It gets my brain working a little bit more so that the next time we come up through there again, now he might very well pull that same stunt, and I'll be a little quicker on it,
Yep.
and I won't have to worry
How,
about
how they
that loop.
feel is also evident in what they're doing, which is recorded by the snow. Because
yeah.
if he's standing there and there's a lot, say there's 30 of his tracks when
in
he was
one
standing
spot.
there pacing, that means that he's waiting and looking.
Yeah,
he's
he spent
nervous.
some time there.
He's there for a very long time.
Yeah.
Right? Or he walked up and stopped and went over here and stopped and went over here and stopped. He's getting ready. He's going to lay down. He's looking for something, right?
Or you're going to take off running.
That's right. And you will learn after you do any amount of tracking, you're going to learn what the signs are in the snow. That's going to help you get that big buck, and it's going to help you become a good tracker.
Well, and also you'll learn which ones you can't.
That's right. When you
No.
see that and you go, "Pfft," nope, we're not doing this today.
Right.
He's taking 2.5 foot steps, going in a beeline. See ya. And you just say, nope, I don't want that one.
Dave Coker's in the shop here, right? And he's talking about hunting with Larry. And
Dude, Dave's such a good guy.
And he says, Larry gets out and looks at about 15 different buck tracks in Ontario. And he's like, nope. And one of them was just a giant. And he said, nope. And then all of a sudden they come around this little corner, and here's this nice little buck goes across the road, and Larry says, that one. And he grabs his gun and walks out, and the cameraman starts following him, and they don't go out 500-600 yards. And here comes the buck across a little bit of a clear cut. He was just poking and looking, and Larry could tell that deer was close by.
Yep, based on his attitude.
He's 80-something years old, right? But he knows what he's looking at, and he says, this is one I can catch because of his experience. Mm-hmm. If you gain that experience, especially as you continue to grow older and you're
It'll
hunting,
let you know if it's worth it or not.
You'll be able to say, yes, this is a deer I can get, and no, that's one I'm never going to catch. We got to do something else, right?
Yep.
So it helps you figure things out, and he was able to shoot that deer on camera at 80-something years old because he could pick out which one would work and which one didn't. That experience can help you like crazy.
Yep.
It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, hopefully you guys have gotten some good info out of this podcast. This is all stuff that we use, stuff that we learned the hard way, and it works really well. And regardless of what's happening in your neck of the woods, as long as there's a deer there, you have a good chance of going to get them. You just have to pay attention and take your time and learn to read the woods, to read his attitude, and to put the patterns of weather and the patterns of behavior together, and you're going to become a great tracker in no time at all.
You'll learn every day.
Yeah.
Right? And when you're open to it, and you don't like force yourself to get it all today.
That's right.
Right.
Patience.
And you have the patience to teach yourself, because you teach you.
Yep.
Then you'll be able to get it all and figure out what works for you and start making a pattern that works, and it'll just start coming to you.
If you guys have any topics or questions or comments, things you'd like to add to the podcast, or stuff you want us to talk about, or things that you think would be interesting, you can send all of those over to our podcast email, askmountaindeer@gmail.com. So askmtndeer@gmail.com. And connect with us on social media. We're looking forward to a really good deer season. September, we're moving in on it. Everybody's getting ready, prepping for bow season, and everyone's getting pretty wound up. We're looking forward. The leaves are changing. Things are happening, and we're very excited. Lots of videos, lots of podcasts, and hopefully lots of deer coming. We can't wait to see what you guys do. Reach out. Let us know how your season went, and we will see you, and we'll talk to you in the next version. Have a great day and a great deer season.
Take care.
Bye-bye.